from news, back to production. What you say? I'm fed to make a stereo. Kuwa diho sugiza. Kuwa diho subutunzi. Kuwa di.
Well, welcome to another episode of Let's Get Real with 7 podcast. So today we have the segment called Mrs. and Mr. Right. So I've had conversations with a bunch of people, and a lot of believers at least say that there's one person for somebody, like for everybody. Like there's only one human being that was created specifically for one person. And so I'm curious to know, what is you guys' aspect on that? So do you guys believe in soulmates, or the fact that there's like one individual for one person? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
False.
Okay, so wait, why do you say that?
We were not the right people for each other.
Absolutely not.
Mm-mm. If we would have had the wisdom then that we have now, we would not have married each other.
Really?
Yeah, for real.
Could you guys elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah. You said.
You wanna?
I got us into
You
it.
cue that up and now you're done.
Yeah, I got us into it. You get us out of it.
So your question is, like, if you think there's only one person out there
Like a
Right.
soulmate.
Mm-hmm.
The right person.
for one person, and I don't. I think you can make a number of different relationships work, and
You
I
can make
think
it
our
work.
relationship is a testimony to that because
Right.
we are not a great match,
Mm-mm.
but
But
We've
we
worked
make
it out.
We make it work.
Okay, so why do people that are married for a long time would say, "Yeah, I found the one. She was the right one for me." Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to see myself with any. Well, of course you would say that because you're married. I would hope so.
if you want to stay with your spouse,
But I feel like people just say that because it sounds like the right thing to say.
Right.
So, okay, so before you guys got married.
There's probably truth
What-
in that, you know? Because
Yeah.
they feel like it is the right thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
But
if they
then,
didn't say that, what would that mean in our culture?
true.
What would that mean if you had married somebody who wasn't the one?
Mm-hmm.
We don't really have a box for that in our culture.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but see, now you're setting up the younger generation with the thought process like, I have to find the one. Like, there's only one person for us, and then that
Right.
leads into people, if something goes wrong, oh, you might not be the one.
You know what the research says?
Oh, no.
The research says that people that end up in marriages because of arranged marriages, so we're
Right.
talking about cultures outside the United States,
Mm-hmm.
they have less divorce and a greater rate of satisfaction than people who voluntarily choose a spouse. So if you don't get to choose your spouse, you actually are more satisfied than if you do get to choose your spouse.
And why do you think that is?
I have no idea, but I think that at the very least, that dispels the myth that we have to find the one.
Right.
Because it's your parents are like, you're going to marry so-and-so, it doesn't matter what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, those people are more satisfied than we are.
Okay, so before you guys got married, you must have felt like she was the one, right? And you said before
I
you had
did.
the same. Okay, so what is it that you've learned about each other now that you guys didn't know you guys first got married?
oh my gosh, how
Even
much
though
time do you have?
I have plenty of time.
We've been together since I was 18, so
Oh.
I mean, I would say there was probably two sets of factors that contributed to us choosing each other.
Mm-hmm.
One was the set of factors where we shared some very deep common values in common.
Mm-hmm.
And the other was some false expectations based on our pathology and insecurity
Mm-hmm.
that resulted in a great deal of crisis for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking for someone who loved Jesus. That was the most important thing in my life.
Right.
And Alita loved Jesus. So that would be on the side of things of common values that mean a lot to us. That
Mhm.
was a good reason to connect. On the other side, I didn't realize this at the time, but I was looking for somebody who was hot and submissive and make me feel like I was a man and in control.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought she was quiet and submissive and hot and all of that. And so I chose her And then we got married, and I'm like, man, you're not submissive? What is up? Like, you got a mouth? You disagree? You have an opinion? You have a point of view? Like, what? This is not how it's supposed to be. But I would say, on her point of view, she also had some expectations that she was not fully aware of at the time. How would you describe that, babe?
Well, I think, you know, we were both really young, and you have certain needs when you're younger, and as you grow and change, your needs change and your personality changes. And so we've done a lot of growing up together, and also kind of growing into ourselves and figuring out like what we need and what we're looking for in our relationship over the years. So what we were looking for when we were, you know, 18 and 28, or however old we were back then, that's just changed so much. And we've had to evolve with it, and I think every relationship either has to evolve with that or it's not gonna last.
What would be you guys' if you could, for the people out there, what would be the one thing you wish you would have known before you guys got married? Now that you guys are at this point of you guys' marriage.
Ooh, that's a hard question.
Yeah, I honestly think that list is too long to answer. I mean, what I would jump in on is, like I mentioned, I was looking for someone to make me feel safe, secure, and in control. And I think Alita was looking for somebody who was strong and a protector and a provider and a father figure. And she saw all this aggression in me and misinterpreted it as a caretaker strength. Except that when we got into a 24/7 living arrangement after marriage, she realized all of that aggression was not about my earnest commitment to take care of her. It was about a self-defense strategy for me. And so her expectation for me to be a protector, strong provider, sort of parent, father figure for her was disappointed. And my expectation for her to be a submissive, hot partner to make me feel like I was liked and wanted was disappointed. She was still hot.
Wasn't disappointed.
No, that's true. That is true. That was not disappointed. But she didn't want me. After 6 months of being married together, she's like, I don't know what I'm doing with you. This was a mistake. And I'm like, whoa. Ditto.
First couple of years.
It was, I frequently refer to it as boot camp.
Yeah.
But it was because our different pathologies, our different insecurities, we had these expectations for each other. And I mean, really, I believe it, by the grace of God, our expectations did not play out the way that we thought they were. Some people, they do.
Yeah.
And they result in super codependent marriages. And that's sad, because then they kind of sort of, it's like finding a drug that really sort of works for you. And then you are an addict for life.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
So, but the man asked a question.
Yeah.
He was asking, what type of advice would you give for someone who's looking for a long-term relationship, right? And
or what have you learned in your own marriage?
what have we
As an
learned?
advice,
I think the advice I would give is that it's wise to be in a place where you don't need someone else, so that you're not just looking for a partner to fulfill something that you need, but you're looking for a partner to sharpen you and challenge you and push you to be a better version of yourself.
Right. But so, see, I think when people hear that, it sounds like it should be an easy task to be able to do that. But I think everyone in life is trying to find out what their purpose is and what they're good at. And so, like, when you are looking for someone, it's almost like all your energy is going towards that a lot of people forget that they actually need to focus on themselves. So, like, it seems like you guys have gotten to a point where at least you guys are not codependent on each other. You guys can actually do it on, like, do your own thing, but still find a way to unite and coexist. How does one do that? Like, how do you, especially like you were saying, you grow, like everyone's still growing every single day. How can you find a way to, almost in a sense, love yourself enough that if they don't love you, then you'll be able to
Right.
be fine.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I mean, for us, so my initial philosophy with how to make marriage work was you throw everything that you can at the wall, and whatever sticks, you go with that. So we tried everything we could think of to try to make our marriage work, because it was ridiculously hard. I mean, I would have divorced Alita if I hadn't been a pastor. And my thought was, if I'm a brand new pastor and then I divorce my wife,
Yeah.
I might lose my career. Those are not very noble motives to stay in a marriage,
Right.
right? But it kept me in the game long enough that I was willing to try whatever I could to try to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So I read books and I tried different strategies, and then finally I agreed to couples counseling, and we tried that. And some things worked and some things didn't, but we both kept trying, and over time, eventually we started finding things that worked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I honestly believe that any two people that are committed into a relationship, if they can just find the patience to keep trying, any two people can find a way to make it work.
Right.
There is no such thing as a soulmate. There is only the dichotomy of easier partnerships
Mm-hmm.
and more difficult partnerships. But there is no such thing as impossible partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, the more difficult partnerships are those that cause the greatest amount of personal individual transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Easy partnerships require very little change. Difficult partnerships require maturity
Mm-hmm.
and growing up. So I'm not sure if one is better than the other. They're just different.
Right.
Easy partnerships are fantastic. They're great. You just have a lot of joy. You don't have to work real hard, and you don't bleed a lot.
Yeah.
Those people are so annoying.
You know? We literally had some friends. I asked him how he met his wife, how they got together, and he tells this story about how she was a missionary in Africa, and he was praying for God to tell him what to do. And he went to Ireland for some reason, I don't remember. He drove around the island and he stopped at a beach and he found these two stones that were white and looked like hearts on the beach. And he picked them up and he took that as a sign from God, and he flew to Africa and he found her in the bush and he presented these stones and he proposed, and she said yes, and everything was perfect ever since. And I'm like, that is such bullshit. That is so unhelpful. All that does is make the rest of us
I mean,
crazy.
good for
feel
them.
inadequate. I'm like,
Good
dude,
for them.
what is going on? I don't know what you're drinking, but that is like 1 in a million. That's like trying to compare yourself with the winners of the lottery.
Yeah.
And for most of us, that's just not how it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for most of us, there are aspects of connection where if it's easier, it does make the process,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, easier. But if it's harder, if we can hang in there, it requires a little more patience, but it actually results in greater personal transformation. So I could have found somebody that was more compatible for me. Alita could have found somebody more compatible for her. Neither one of us would have grown up
Mm-hmm.
as much as we've had to over
Right.
the last 20 years. And we've been married for almost 20 years now. And actually, when we started, while we say we would have chosen somebody different if we would have known then what we know now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't speak for you, but for me, I am so grateful for what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's my best friend, and I love her, and I'm grateful for her, and I wouldn't be who I am
Yeah.
without her.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have the wisdom to choose her then
Mm-hmm.
if I would have known then what I know now.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful. I wouldn't choose anybody else now,
Yeah.
but if you backed it up 20 years ago,
Yeah. We wouldn't recommend this path for anyone else.
this was a hard path.
Yeah. Go with the whole insecurities and like how you guys are able to overcome you guys' own and then find a way to navigate it together. And then the whole cycle situation, like how do you guys prevent yourself from going back to the old times where you guys didn't care too much for each other, right?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think one thing that we've always had in common is that we both just have a hunger to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So that has really served us well in our relationship
Mm-hmm.
because we're both always reading and, you know, going to therapy and looking for mentorship. We've never, and maybe that's because of how hard our relationship has been, but we've never been at a point like, oh, we're good, like we got this, and we can just cruise now.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we're in seasons where we feel like our relationship is really going well, we'll go in for tune-ups with our therapist because we're like, we feel great right now. Like this is a good time to go in and examine like where can we grow and where can we challenge each other, or what are some blind spots we have. So I feel like that hunger and that instinct has really served us well.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we are challenged by an insecurity or a fear or something, we're not necessarily gonna try to hide it or avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to learn about it and figure out like how to get through it or how to grow into it.
Yeah.
So I think we've been really fortunate in that way, just because of how our personalities are.
Yeah, I think for me, it's largely been a result of exposure to the idea that maybe our society doesn't know what it's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe our culture is not accurate.
Right.
So maybe these common narratives are something to challenge, not just to accept unquestioned.
Yeah.
So for me, it happened uniquely in when I started processing my own insecurities and why I was so reactive.
Mm-hmm.
I found a book that was helpful. It was called Healing the Shame That Binds You, by a guy who's actually written a bunch of books on shame. And it was my first exposure to this idea of what shame is, this feeling of personal inadequacy. And I started learning about what this is and how common it is and that everybody has it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember asking one of my profs at the time, this is when I was in one of my master's programs, and this is a guy who was a professor and he was also a therapist as well. He was dual vocational. And I asked him what he knew about shame, just because I learned the term from this book that I'd been reading. And his answer was, it is the universal human condition. That was like 25 years ago. I've never forgotten that. Shame is the universal human condition. And I was blown away by that. My thought was like, what? So this isn't just me? This feeling of like I have to be something that I can't be? This is not just an American thing, not just a male thing, this is a universal thing? So I started reading more and more and more, and sure enough, Brene Brown later on, I mean, she's given a couple of TED Talks and she's written a boatload of books on shame, and that's helped a lot. Kurt McDonald has written some stuff. Pia Melody has written a number of books on this. So a lot of it was books and YouTube for me. But realizing that what if society collectively is a lot like we are individually? Like what if the insecurities and the rules that society makes up for what is normal are actually pretty much the same as the insecurities and the rules that we make up as individuals? Then maybe it's not quite as trustworthy, and maybe it's not quite as authoritative.
Yeah.
So I started realizing, gosh, man, our society is actually really insecure. And for male society in particular, the emphasis on violence and performance and emotional restriction and strength and not weakness, like realizing how universal all of this was for men was super liberating, because I began to realize all of this is a fallacy.
Yeah.
All of this is an attempt to try to feel okay in response to a primary feeling of insecurity.
Mhm.
So once I began seeing what was going on the larger scale,
Mhm.
I started feeling more free of it because I started not trusting it. I started seeing it as a problem instead of just an assumed truth. So I started pushing against it.
Yeah. That's a great. That's a great perspective on that aspect. So now, nobody's perfect, right? So even though you guys are in a good place now, how is it that you guys find a way to hold each other accountable in a sense, right? Because like communications, I feel like that's one of the biggest things, right? Is communication. And so I'm pretty sure after 20 years, you know how to get under her skin, and she probably knows how to get under your skin, right? And so how do you guys figure out how to, in moments where you could get under her skin, like not because you understand that not only do you love this person, but you gotta wake up to them the next day anyway, so maybe not. So for the people out there who, because I feel like a lot of people do this, like even in like just like friendships in general, like if you hurt me, then I'm gonna hurt you. How do you guys navigate that like situation in your marriage? Would be the question.
So how do we not interact with difficult conversations? How do we not be defensive?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like-
that would be a better wording for it.
How do you do that? I mean, you do it well, and
It's
I'm
a
grateful
lot
for it,
of,
but
like-
how do you do it?
It's a lot of like holding your tongue. But I think too, like now that we have kids,
We just team up against them, and we're like, man, those kids are crazy. Like, man, what is wrong with those kids? I'm just kidding.
that's not what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
No, I think now that we have kids, it's really convicting to me.
Mm-hmm.
How I'm like, what behavior I'm I'm expressing in front of them,
Yeah.
because they do everything we do. They just, we're modeling for them constantly. So, I hear my own voice in my head sometimes because I'll tell them, be kind to your sister, or treat her the way you want to be treated. And then if we're starting to get frustrated with each other, especially in front of the girls, I'm like, oh, I need to be kind right now,
Right.
And I feel like in the last 4 years I've grown exponentially just having them watching our relationship, because that is immediate accountability. That you're living your life out in front of these like little impressionable people that you want them to grow up and be better than you are.
Right.
So it's that constant feeling of like someone watching you, because they are.
I think it's really good. It touches on something I don't think I've fully thought of before. In the same way that we are learning to behave differently because of how we parent, I mean, I'm a therapist. So there are many moments in which I'm counseling clients, and then I come home and find myself in a situation and I'm thinking about something that I know is research-based and I have given to clients, and now here's an opportunity for me to use it personally. And I know not everybody has the benefit of being a therapist, and so being exposed to that kind of learning, but something about being responsible for others, giving to others, helping others, and then paying attention to what is helpful for them to be used for ourselves. So whether it's a therapist for clients, or it's a parent for children, or it's a mentor for younger people, or whatever, something about helping others navigate their struggles and then using that as well in our struggles has actually been really helpful.
It's kind of a catalyst for endless growth.
Yeah, like not just receiving from others, but as we give. I mean, I honestly don't know if I've ever learned more than when I'm teaching.
Mm-hmm.
When we are investing in helping others, it results in a lot of growth for ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing is that as we have given each other and ourselves permission to be imperfect human beings and found language to just name that,
Mm-hmm.
that we've become more comfortable with naming our experience in the moment, even if we don't fully understand it. That's been super helpful.
Right.
So to be able to say, I feel really angry and really defensive right now, and I don't know why.
Right.
That has been really liberating.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel super overwhelmed and I need to take a break, and I don't know why I feel so overwhelmed, but it is what it is.
Right.
That has
Yeah.
been really, really helpful.
You know what? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm still going.
No, that's it.
Something else that just came to mind is that, you know, as we are teaching our girls to talk about their feelings, I feel
Right.
like we've become better
Mm-hmm.
at talking about our feelings too. So like we'll
Mm.
see that one of them is frustrated, like because of their facial expression or something. We'll be like, "Baby, what are you feeling right now? Like what
Mm.
I see on your face that you know something's wrong, or what do you feel in your body?" And then I feel like those moments help me too.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed you ask me that more too. Like, what do you need right now, or what are you feeling?
Mm.
So I feel like that's been a big growth point for us the last couple of years too.
Yeah.
Like,
Asking questions, paying attention,
yeah,
and not putting pressure on ourselves to know exactly what's going on with ourselves or our partner.
right. Like, not even. Sometimes there's times you don't know what you need in the moment, but
Sometimes we don't know what our partner's feeling. Sometimes we don't know what we ourselves are feeling.
Yeah.
And so to be patient for that has been really helpful.
yeah,
I've literally had moments where I've asked Alita, like, I'm feeling stressed and angry and I don't know why. Ask me questions.
Mm.
he'll even be like, "Can you ask me right now?" And he'll have a specific question he wants me to ask him. And then he'll be like, "Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I need to think about that."
I had a moment last week where I was giving a lecture, I was giving a presentation for a group, and I was feeling a little unsettled about it. And I asked her, I said, "Could ask me what like my one takeaway is that I hope everybody gets." So she asked me, "What's your one takeaway that everybody gets?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a good question."
He's like, "I don't know."
Like sometimes we know the question that we need, but we don't know the answer yet. And if we can deal with the distress, with the discomfort of the uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
those are really helpful steps.
Yeah.
It leads to certainty. It leads to clarity.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to have a little patience,
Right.
and then we'll get there. But if we insist on certainty all at once, all up front, there's not a lot of that available. And so then there's a lot of frustration. But if we can just deal with, I don't know what's going on, but here's one thing that I do know. So we've literally had times where, I mean, Alita has cried. She'll break down and cry. She's like, "I don't know why I'm crying."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why she's crying.
So what do you do in that moment? Do you just
I ask her why she's crying.
yeah?
And then she says, "I don't know why I'm crying." And then she takes a break, and then we breathe, and then we come back together, and sometimes we fight, sometimes we don't. But then we keep asking questions, and the instance that I'm thinking of, eventually what she came up with was, "I think I was having a panic attack."
Mm.
And I had no idea. And I'm like, that is so helpful for me. This was when like I was trying to stack a second level bunk bed on top of the first level by myself.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
And I got stuck in this situation, and I needed her to like throw a little muscle on a corner.
He's like, "Hey, baby."
I'm like, "Can you just help with this?" And then she started like freaking out, and I'm like, and then I got frustrated. I'm like, "Just leave." And then she started crying, and I'm like, "What is going on?" Long story short, it turns out like she thought I was gonna drop this bed on her head, And she was panicking.
I was
she
like,
was in a
someone's
life
gonna die right
or
now.
death situation. And in my mindset, I'm like, worst case scenario here, I'm gonna crack the wood on this bunk bed, no big deal.
Right.
But in her mindset, there was a lot more on the line. I didn't know that at the time. But as we talked about it later, and she mentioned, I think I was having a panic attack, my whole attitude changed from defensive to like, what the heck is your problem, man? Why can't you just either help or just get out of the bedroom and let me handle it? It changed from that to, oh my gosh, you felt scared and unsafe. That is more important than a bunk bed. And my whole attitude changed.
I'm so sorry. To just hit on the aspect of it, how important is the fact that not only does he take the moment to comprehend how you're feeling and actually take time to be like, oh man, like maybe I wasn't wrong, because I feel like a lot of times people dismiss each other's feelings, and I think that's a really big issue.
Yeah.
How important for you in moments like that is it nice that he actually isn't just dismissing your feelings and actually like trying to help you in a sense?
Yeah, I think that's where repair happens. Because a lot of the time, you know, in the heat of the moment, we're gonna misunderstand each other,
Right.
and even misunderstand ourselves, because emotions come up and they come up so fast. For me, at least, I don't have a handle on what's going on until later.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we have a chance to get some space or cool off or even just process, and then come back together and really talk through it and hold compassion for each other, that's where repair happens, and that's
Right.
where we can build trust, because we're like, oh, okay, that's what was happening for you. This is what was happening for me, and I can totally see how we missed each other completely and just misunderstood each other. It wasn't that you didn't care about me or didn't care about how I was feeling in the moment. We were just missing each other.
Right.
And those moments are where so much growth happens, because we get to lean into each other more and learn to understand each other better, and really
understand each other better.
be vulnerable in that too.
That's where we tune in. Is like where I get what you're going through, and when you get what I was going through,
Right.
then we start to really tune into each other and connect on the same wavelength.
Yeah, it's so valuable to have those repairing moments.
I mean, that's the foundation of intimacy. Whether it's repair or it's we do it right up front the first time, is like when I get what you're feeling and when I can enter into that with you, and when you get what I'm feeling and you can enter into that with me, then we're together. We're together in our most vulnerable primary experiences, and then we're not defensive. But when we are vulnerable and exposed, or trying to be vulnerable and exposed, and when our partner doesn't get it, it's like, what the heck? Why can't you see what's so obvious to me? That's when we get really defensive and critical and judgmental, and we fall into places and opinions and attitudes like, maybe you just don't care. How could you not get what I'm saying right now if you actually cared? It's so obvious to me. If we just take a breath and slow down and realize maybe where our partner's coming from and how different it is from where we're coming from.
Yeah. What would you guys say the reason behind why people can't comprehend that aspect of it or understand that aspect of it? Like being able to meet someone where they're at, because I feel like, let's if we want to use the spiritual terms, like I think God uses exactly where we're at. Like He never asks us to change, but for us understand, especially for believers who understand that, why do you guys think it's so hard to meet someone in their most vulnerable situation? Like, do you think that plays with insecurities and you not being confident in yourself, or you feeling like, what would you guys say, like, why do you guys think that is?
I think there's a couple things. I think to be others aware, you have to be very self-aware. So again, that just goes back to what I was saying in the very beginning. Like, you have to do the work to become self-aware and to be in a healthy place as a single person, just as one person, before you can be in a place to be in a healthy relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or as a parent to
Friendship.
parent a
Yeah,
child,
right.
or
Mhm.
I think it's very vulnerable to put yourself in someone else's shoes, especially when you're at odds with each other.
Right.
So to be able to be self-aware enough to see your emotions and to handle them with maturity and put them aside long enough to say, okay, that's there, but where were you? Now I want to put myself in your shoes and really understand where you're coming from. It just takes a lot of work.
And patience. We are not trained as a culture to be patient with discomfort and pain and fear. And the reality is, if we're going to understand what's going on beneath those things, we have to be able to tolerate it long enough
Yeah.
to see. We're trained to avoid pain and fear and get out of it as quickly as possible. And so we miss a lot of truth because we just fall victim to the lie that we can't handle it. When the truth is that we can. I mean, all of us can. That really is the truth. We can do hard things.
Yeah.
As a culture, we're trained to believe that we can't, but if we just relax and pay attention to the hard things that we're in the middle of, what we discover is that we can tolerate it.
Don't you think as a culture though, too, we're also trained that we don't need to do hard things? Like we can buy our way out of it, or we can
I think
get
that
around it.
we are trained in an Epicureanism-based value system in our culture. So Epicureanism is...
Yeah, please. I
You
was
just gotta Google that.
You and me both.
Epicureanism, by way of Hegel, these are both worth Googling,
Here we go.
associates pain with evil and pleasure with good. So we run from pain because we believe it's evil.
Right.
We run towards pleasure because we associate it with good. It's inaccurate.
So it's a value system.
It's a complete value system, and it is a subtle value system that has been unnamed for 300 years in our culture, but it is the American value. Avoid pain, pursue pleasure. That is truly what it means to be American. We don't name it, we don't talk about it. It drives everything in our culture. And if we really stop to wrestle with the questions that we've had such a hard time answering as to why do Americans do things, inevitably 100% of the time, that is the reason.
Okay, wait. Isn't that hedonism? There's like a...
Hedonism.
Hedonism is an exaggerated form of that. Epicureanism is more along the lines of associating beauty and pleasure with goodness. So it's not as simple as just pursue pleasure because the world is futile. So enjoy whatever you can with your senses and then die. That's hedonism. Epicureanism is tied to a more existential and philosophical value system. It's not just sensory pleasure and short term. Hedonism is very short term. Epicureanism, though, associates beauty with goodness. And there's an aspect of goodness that is beauty, but it's only an aspect. The problem with Epicureanism is that it consolidates goodness with beauty. It says that all goodness is beauty, and all beauty is goodness.
So
But the
then
reality is, like,
there's no goodness in pain or suffering.
exactly, except the problem is that in the human design, as well as in the mammalian design, or you could even expand that to the entire living organismic design, pain is good. We need pain. Pain tells us that something is wrong and that something is needed, that we're not experiencing. If we didn't have pain, we would never know that we're hungry. We would never know that we're out of breath. We would never know that we're too hot. We would never know that we're too socially disconnected. Because loneliness is pain. And it drives us to make a phone call or a text message or hang out with somebody. We need pain. Pain is good. It's just unpleasant. In our culture, we don't realize that. So we run from that. And that applies in our intimate relationships as well. We experience pain and we start asking deep, unnecessary questions like, maybe did I make the wrong choice? That is so foolish. Whereas it might be so much more helpful if I commit into an intimate relationship and I experience pain. It would be so much more helpful if I pause to ask myself, what is going wrong or what am I missing? Because maybe there's an opportunity to grow or change the relationship, or maybe there's an opportunity to grow or change something in how I do relationship. And maybe that results in the relationship growing and maturing. Maybe it results in the relationship ending. Who knows? But if we learn from our pain, then we grow. If we run from our pain, then we don't. And defensiveness is running from pain. I mean, universally, that is the reason why we are defensive. We are running from pain. If we could just take, I'm gonna cuss again. If we could just take a fucking breath.
Thanks for the warning.
Then we could endure the pain long enough to see what's on the other side. That's all.
Wait, so question, so why do we understand that so much when it comes to working out? We all understand that you have to feel pain to be able to grow muscle.
Such a good analogy.
But like, we don't apply that to life. Like, why would it have work for our muscles but not be able to work for our everyday life?
Yeah,
Well, and why would,
it's a good question.
achieving whatever body you're looking for take a lot of work that's
Right.
painful, but trying to achieve a healthy relationship wouldn't take a lot of work that's painful.
That's
Yeah,
it.
well, we have different standards for the process.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I mean, my opinion is that because when we get into interpersonal relationships and the insecurities that get triggered there, what we're touching on are our core psychosocial needs for survival. These are hardwired psychosocial needs that have been researched for maybe 50 years now. And when those needs are not met, those emotional needs are not met in relationship, we see correlations with health degradation, inflammation, increased mortality. We fall apart. Like, these are real needs. These are not just psychological woo-woo, ideas. Like, there are 3 core needs that we all need. Clinically, they're referred to as autonomy, relatedness, and competence. I think more understandably, they're referred to as we need attentiveness. We need to pay attention to each other. We need affection. We need to feel like we are likable. And ability. We need to feel like there's some strength in us and on our team. Those are 3 core human needs. And if we don't have those, we see increased inflammation, we see increased viral infection, we see increased rheumatoid arthritis, decreased liver functioning. I mean, the list is endless and it's insane. These are really fundamental human needs. These are not just wants or preferences or ideals. These are needs. So when our insecurities get triggered, they get triggered in the realm of those fundamental needs. So this would be like somebody pulling a plastic bag over your head. So why do you have such a difficult time tolerating the pain that comes with a plastic bag over your head when you have such an easier time tolerating the pain that comes with working out at the gym? Because your life is not on the line at the gym. But when there's a plastic bag over your head, your life is on the line.
Right.
And when we talk about, am I worth understanding and noticing? Am I enjoyable, likable, delightable, lovable enough to want? Do I have any ability to bring to the table? We're talking about fundamental human needs. And if those needs are not met in relationship, then on an interpersonal level, which we are deceiving ourselves if we think that we can function in a healthy way as human beings without relationship. That is not our design. We are a herd animal. If we don't get those interpersonal needs met, it's just as threatening as pulling a plastic bag over our head. Working out is great, but it's also optional.
Right.
It's not necessary for survival.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, oxygen, food, water, attentiveness, affection,
Mm-hmm.
connection, those things are essential. Those are not optional. And if those things are threatened, then we go straight to fight or flight. And then we blame whatever the nearest, most obvious threat could be, which oftentimes is misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll blame our partner.
Our closest relationships.
Yeah, you're the one in front of me, so I blame you. Even
You're the
though-
one triggering me.
Right.
It must be your fault.
Even though it may not actually be our partner, that's the problem. But we're looking for some bad guy to blame so we can kill the enemy that feels so threatening, so counterproductive. It's so common.
I'm gonna go back just real quick, just to kind of make a point. You guys were talking about how your kids almost kind of help keep you guys accountable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys said on the aspect of like it's almost like when you're serving someone else, it kind of motivates you to do the same thing, right? And I would like almost apply that in a sense of like, well, I think we're all called to serve, right? And I think a lot of people misinterpret the fact that if I serve, then I won't get anything.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times you get the most when you do serve. You get that experience, you get that knowledge, you learn how people act, and then you're able to in turn apply it to whatever relationship you are. I think our society it's all about me, give me this, but it's really about give, and then in return you're gonna receive. So like, I think that's how God has created. Like, the more you give, I think that's the more you receive. But I think the notion that people want is the money aspect of it. You get way more than money. But I think everyone's looking for that money, like, oh, if I'm not getting money, then I must not be getting anything. No, you're getting so much more valuable things than that. But that's, I don't want to keep you guys too long, because I could sit here and talk to you guys all day. But I want to hit just a little bit of a fun aspect of it. So you said the number one thing that really you wanted the most was someone who loved Jesus, right? She loved Jesus, but she drove you crazy. So can you talk about so that was very important to you, right? And I would hope it still is important to you. But I think a lot of time we misinterpret, I want to make sure that I'm saying this correct. I think there's a lot, you can fake your way around anything, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially when you at the beginning stages, like everyone, you want to be the best you. And so a lot of people fake it and they get married because they're in the beginning, like what you're saying, you wanted someone who was submissive, attractive, and all that good stuff. And so she had those qualities, but you didn't really get to know her personally. So
I thought she had those qualities. She was actually just polite and quiet. I thought that meant submissive, but I completely misread it.
Right.
Like, I got this like aggressive Italian woman who's like, oh no you don't. I'm like, what? Anyway, but I get what you're saying, yes.
Right. So how do you, because for me, I'm a believer as well too, and that's something that really stands out. I'm like, I would like someone who believes. But that doesn't always translate into a perfect marriage. I think people miss, if I find someone who believes, our marriage is going to be flawless. But then it's also people think, if I follow Christ, then my life's going to, no, your life's going to be it's going to be low-key a living hell because you're being attacked all the time. Because, like, the devil notices that you're serving Christ. And so, like, what else is he going to do? He's not going to be like, well, let me just let this one go. No, his ultimate goal is to get as many people down in hell with him. So, could you guys hit on that aspect of it? Like, people have this notion of if they believe in this is gonna be a perfect marriage. Clearly, as you guys have spoken to, it's not always the case. But I also want you guys to hit on the aspect of like, if this is another case too, how that's helped you guys' relationship. The fact that you guys both believe as well too. Because I'm not trying to sit here and be like, no, you shouldn't try to find someone who believes. But how has that also helped you guys in turn as well? If,
You go.
if that question made sense.
That's a good question. I mean,
There were a
essentially,
lot
it
of
sounds
questions
like beyond all of the strategies and techniques and insights, how does Jesus, how did Jesus help you guys stay together? That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
Well, it helped for sure that, you know, both of us being committed to Christ want to live like him, and he is the ultimate servant. You know, he is such a good model to us of serving everyone around you and putting others first. So that, I think that's really the foundation that makes any marriage work, is just putting the other person first. If both of you are doing that consistently, then things, you know, things are going to work out eventually. So we have been really fortunate to have that foundation throughout our whole marriage. Now our spirituality has changed and grown over the years, and you know, just like everything else in our relationship, we've grown up so much. We're not in the same place spiritually we were, but I don't think our marriage would have made it this far without God in it. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's such a good question. When I was disillusioned with our marriage, and I was despairing about my vocational future, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had become completely disheartened with my previous industry and career. And I hit rock bottom. All I had was Christ. And I had to confront, through all of that, I had to confront that if I don't have a marriage that satisfies, if I don't have a career that satisfies, if I don't have an income that satisfies, is Jesus enough? And that was 6 months of anguish that led me to that internalized truth that Jesus is enough. But I had to go through the fire to get there. I mean, I drank a lot of cheap alcohol during those 6 months. I coped in many ways that were not healthy, but then I also poured my heart out in prayer and in journaling and in the Word, and I sought God out, and I asked really hard, honest questions. And where I landed was, Lord, if I have a marriage that's completely disastrous, and if I have no vocational future, and if I'm never going to make an impact in this life, and if I'm never going to make any money, at the end of the day, you're enough. When I landed there, when I took a breath, and I felt the reality of that, when I began to absorb that, then I began to see opportunity and goodness But for me, and I know this is not how it is for everybody, but for me, everything had to be taken away. I hated my marriage, and I hated being stuck and filing for unemployment every week, and I hated not knowing what the rest of my life was going to look like, and feeling like my life was over when I was in my 30s. I hated that. And I wrestled with that despair and that emptiness for 6 months, and I just kept coming back to Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Where I landed was Psalm 39, and actually Psalm 39 is a psalm where King David, gives this amazing prayer of self-encouragement, where the way that he encourages himself is by reminding himself that life is short. And that even if it's hard for the rest of his life, at least it doesn't last very long, and then it's done, and then he gets to be with the Lord. And that's where I landed, and I'm like, hell yeah. Even if my marriage is a disaster for the next 60 years, even if I never find a job or a career or a track of work that actually makes any difference or makes any money, at least I only have to hang in there for 60 years and then I'm done. That was very encouraging for me to hang on to Christ. Even if I don't understand what this life is about, I'm hanging on to you, and I trust that someday there's going to be another chapter. When I resigned myself to that, there was a lot of truth and insight that began to open up to me about this life on this side of glory. But I kind of had to hit rock bottom first. I kind of wonder sometimes if our intimate relationships, if our ideas about career and vocation, if all of our dreams and aspirations, sometimes I wonder how much of that is like drugs and addiction. I wonder how much of it is in line with our human design, and I wonder how much of it is just our attempt to distract ourselves and feel better, and it's short term. And I don't really have an answer for that. I just wonder. I don't know. But I know for me, there was a lot of stuff that had to be stripped away before I could really find Christ. And then once I found Christ, I found my wife. And I realized she was awesome. But even beyond just the first few years of our marriage, I mean, honestly, that was probably like 5, maybe even 10 years of our marriage, where I would go back and forth wondering if she was actually a good decision. When I reached the end of myself and I found just Jesus, then I started noticing all this goodness in life, including my wife. And it was, I've been 100% grateful ever since, that was in Coronado, when I was drinking $6 bottles of vodka, yeah, all that stuff. Just binging on Hulu. And
A lot of cooking shows.
There was a lot of bananas going on back then. Yeah. But then ever since then, like, I just feel so grateful. Like every year since then, I feel so grateful for not just Alita, but for my life and for the Lord and my friendships. And I'm just really I'm not really discouraged anymore.
I don't feel like we answered your question though.
Yeah,
Sorry,
probably
I feel
not.
like
It was
we
very
kinda-
beautiful, bro. Like I'm saying, that much. It was really nice. I really liked the answer. I can't tell you.
That's probably true.
You're like, I don't even remember my
It's late,
question
dude.
now.
Dude, we're 50, man. We're old. We're like, we go to bed like an hour ago, man. This is like,
Don't say we. Don't.
Okay.
First of all, I really appreciate you guys for coming on the podcast. I really do. You guys
This
had
has
some
been really
really,
fun. Thank
yeah,
you.
it is
definitely.
fun, man.
You guys had some really great answers, and I think, well, I don't know who's gonna help, but I definitely think it's gonna help somebody. I think for the main perspective of just everything, so some of the stuff that you were saying at the end, like the fact that you're still, I don't know, again, this notion that you have to come to Christ perfect, like it's such a, it doesn't make any sense. Well, why would he down the crowd? It just sometimes it like doesn't make any sense to me why people think that way. But the fact, like you, with your one, like you just being so honest, in fact, like you were still drinking cheap alcohol and still like. Just because you're still drinking doesn't mean you can't cry out to God. Like you can still do both. Like that's who Christ is, and I think people out there need to understand that. And like I think the churches don't really like. I don't. Yeah, that's another kind of. But no, I really do appreciate you guys for coming on. But it seems like it's past you guys' bedtime, so I'll let you guys go. But hey, as always, guys, thank you guys for checking out another episode of Let's Get Real with 7 podcast. Could you guys tell the people you guys' name? I didn't really get to say that at the beginning.
I'm Alita Lynch, and this
Alita.
is John.
John, thank you guys for coming on. And as always, God loves you. I love you. God bless and stay safe. Thank y'all. I love y'all. Peace. Man, thank you guys. I appreciate it.